All right, well, welcome everyone. We're really excited to share with you the results of our Exploring Farm Labor Models project. And also just wanted to say happy National Ag Week, which was last week. We wanted to schedule this around Ag Labor Week, and this coming week also we'll be celebrating National Farm Workers Day and Cesar Chavez Day. So seems like a timely and appropriate thing to be talking about farm labor. We're also right at the height of the season for some folks if you're from the Northeast as the season's getting going. Labor is either already on your farm and you're all set, or you're still struggling to get your last minute crew together and pulling your hair out as my husband is. So we can feel for you either way, celebrate your joys or feel your pain if you're still working on those aspects. So I'm trying to advance my slides here. They're not moving. But my name's Jennifer Hashley. I'm the director of new entry. I'll introduce myself in a second, but just thought if you would all like to rename yourself if your name isn't correct on Zoom, add your pronouns, your farm name, and maybe where you're located to the chat. Just ask that everybody keep yourself muted until the Q&A session. And please add questions to the chat as we go. We'll be monitoring that and making sure that we have time for Q&A, and then we'll have some breakout sessions as well where we can talk about our findings and the models that we've talked about and give you a chance to provide additional feedback as well. So feel free to keep your video on or off. We're recording the session, and hopefully you can have that on and available when we move into the breakouts later on during the webinar. So again, my name is Jennifer Hashley. I'm the director of the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. Just very brief background. Our mission is to train beginning farmers, and hopefully they grow food that's nutritious and accessible to all and keep land in active production. So we're located in Beverly, Mass. In northeastern Massachusetts on the ancestral, traditional, contemporary, and unceded lands of the Pawtucket, Massachusetts people. If you would like to add where you're coming from as well, your native lands, you can check out this web link, nativeland.ca, and put that in the chat with your introduction. The new entry program, we have three main programs, our farmer training programs, which involve all our courses and workshops, an incubator farm. We run a food hub that helps distribute and aggregate products, and we run a national initiative that helps provide professional development to other land-based farmer training programs that run incubator and apprenticeship programs across the country. And we're really excited to have partnered with some amazing organizations and groups and farmers to do this project called Creating Farm Business Models to Address Employee Hiring, Training, and Management Barriers. This is a 3-year SARE Novel Approaches grant, which is a division of their research and education grant. And we were really looking to get feedback from small and mid-scale diversified fruit and vegetable farmers who hire part-time or seasonal workers in New England. And we also wanted to get feedback from farm workers and hear their perspectives about their needs and interests and whatnot, and really trying to figure out, are there other models that could work that will help solve some of the labor challenges? So our intent was to conduct a variety of methods to get that feedback, from an initial flash poll to get feedback on the issues going into the proposal, some qualitative and quantitative input from farmer groups, including interviews and focus groups. We did a lot of focus groups, compiling that with some legal analysis around labor laws and identifying themes that emerge regarding these potential models. So we'll hear about that in more detail from Farm Commons in a little bit. Our project partners were Farm Commons, who has done amazing work across the country in legal education for producers and a lot of the land grant and extension programs throughout New England. So we worked with the University of Vermont Extension and Mary Peabody, and Nicole Waters, who's here from the Cornell Small Farms Program, and Jeff Martin from UConn, University of Connecticut Extension, and Seth Wilner and Linda Brushett and Kanisha Reynolds, who's no longer there, but through the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension as well. So each of these partners played a big role in helping to outreach to producers and to host focus groups in their regions to provide input for this project. So thank you all for being part of this project. And as you can imagine, we heard a lot of labor challenges in the Northeast and probably everywhere if you're tuning in from other parts of the country. You know, for folks that are hiring workers, there's a lot of challenges in finding and hiring, where to advertise, where do you recruit? Do farmers really have the time to hire, onboard, train, do all the paperwork and all of that? And are they finding people at the appropriate skill level? Are they looking for entry-level people? Some folks are looking for that, of course. Also, others are looking for farm managers and folks that really bring a lot of experience. And they have the right experience for the type of enterprise that the farm is doing. And can they afford to pay the wages that are being commanded in the marketplace? And especially as the movement for minimum wage increases continues to go up, and as some departments of labor or state agencies are even eliminating overtime for agricultural workers, it's really putting a pinch on employers to make sure that they're keeping up with that and that their farm business is viable enough to cover those increasing costs of labor. And then once you find the folks, are they reliable? Do they show up? Are you able to keep them coming back year after year? Some of the issues on the farm worker side, both around retaining for the farm owner, but also, wages, again, seasonality. Sometimes people are hired only for a short season and then they have to find work in the winter time or other months. Does it include housing, the cost of living in areas? Does the farm job include benefits, especially health insurance? We heard that a lot from the workers, or sick time or time off or unemployment insurance. And then how are the working conditions, and are there opportunities for professional growth and development? And one thing we heard back from the survey, people stay when they feel really respected by their employer on the job. So those are some of the challenges for workers and employers. I'm sure there are many more we can talk about. So our hypothesis going into this project was, if we could do the legal research and the social research to really explore some potential models, would they be feasible? Would they be something that stakeholders would look to implement on their own? Like, what are the qualities and things of these models that could hopefully help increase the availability of qualified laborers to farmers? Maybe reduce the cost of farmers, maybe it would increase the cost, but reduce some stressors in other areas, and also meet the needs of employees to have steady work that offers potential for advancement. So in our initial proposal, we put forth 4 potential business models that we would explore: a producer-owned, worker collaborative, or collaborative business, maybe what would be an LLC or a cooperative, a worker-owned collaborative business, a temporary farm labor business, and we thought about investigating maybe a collaborative intern training advising program. That ended up not being one of the 4 models that we put forward in the first round of focus groups, but we did talk about the other 3 in quite in detail. And our approach to the project was to really present those 4 business models. We Farm Commons called them the Suntown 5, which was great. It was a very nice way to walk through the different models and how they might work in a live type scenario. We held 9 focus groups in 2020. The year that COVID hit, a lot of them were scheduled in person, and some were able to go virtual, and some ended up getting canceled. But we had 46 participants across the 5 states that received a $50 incentive, and it was a mix of owners and workers. And so we had a lot of feedback from those reports and put together a report. And then out of that, we ended up, Farm Commons ended up taking the information, then synthesizing it down to really focus on the desired characteristics. And that was called Entity X, which we'll hear more about as well. And then we went back to different focus groups, held 8 additional focus groups throughout 2021, all virtual, and had 58 participants across the region to get their feedback, both through a survey and focus group combined mixed methods process there. And then there's a report on the results of that. And then we currently just wrapped up a survey that we sent out that followed the focus group format to get additional input from across the region as well. So that is just closing, and just wanted to share a little bit of tidbit from the current survey, just to kind of lead into what you'll hear from Rachel next. Our real question was, like, to what extent does this entity provide value to you? And then, this was kind of a blanket question between owners and workers, and then we dove into a lot of the very specific details. So here are some of the results. It's kind of, seems pretty valuable, moderately very valuable or extremely valuable. And so we're just really trying to test the waters to see how this could work moving forward, and what it would mean to take the next steps. So that's a little introduction that I had, and I wanted to turn it over to Rachel to walk us through even more detail of specifically our findings and next steps. So take it away, Rachel.
Right.
Oops.
Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to talk with you more about the results. What did we discover through the course of doing these focus groups? Before I get too deep, let's make sure you know a little bit about where I'm coming from. Farm Commons is our organization. We empower agricultural communities to address their own legal vulnerabilities within an ecosystem of support. We got into this project because we do a lot of information on farm employment law. But what we do goes beyond just providing education. We also do leadership development. We help explore and support solutions that are generated by farmers and for farmers. And so this really comes into that line of work. How can we actually facilitate solutions around labor challenges? We are a member-driven organization. We are not attorneys for hire, so that's not how we make our money or the reasons why we do this work. My name is Rachel Armstrong. I am the executive director, joining you from Duluth, Minnesota. This is where I grew up, where my the family, before I was born, farmed for a few generations. And before us, the Fond du Lac tribe of Ojibwe stewarded this land. This is the month of Onabane Gizis in the Ojibwe language, which is crust on the snow moon. And indeed, still snow here, still a good crust on it. I'm also the founder of the organization. So let's start. Jennifer gave a great recap of what's the hypothesis, how do we get here, but I want to take a moment to really focus on what assets farmers are bringing to this situation. We've discussed a lot of the challenges and the situations that we're trying to solve. What do we discover farmers really have as assets? Comes as no surprise, resiliency. Farmers bring and value innovation, creativity, and resourcefulness. They have wisdom and solution and knowledge to create their own legal solutions. So we saw that come out throughout this project, that there is an openness to innovation. There are creative ideas. Folks are looking for how they can best use their resources to address their challenges. We also found farmers brought solidarity to the table. This was also the case when talking with workers. Both appreciate mutual support and the connection that they receive within the farming community. We didn't see, a lot of opposition between the worker focus groups and the owner focus groups. There was a sense of support and connection, both between those groups and with the broader agricultural and farming community as a whole. There was also a sense that when folks do work collaboratively, farmers can address the shared challenges that they face. There's a sense that there must be solutions out there. We can use our resilience. We can use our solidarity to get somewhere. But at the same time, this will come as no surprise. One of the assets that farmers and farm communities have is autonomy. There's a strong value on independence and self-sufficiency. These are folks that can do it themselves, even though they value solidarity. And are resilient. So willingness to share control, that's a little bit more of a sticking point. That's more of doesn't always lend itself. People don't always come to the table saying, well, gosh, there's a lot I can give up about how I run my farm. People get into farming so that they can run it themselves. That was true both on the farm owning side and on the worker side. Again, these are folks that are oftentimes aspiring to farm ownership at some point, so embody many of the characteristics of the owners, valuing independence, self-sufficiency, and controlling for whom and where they work. So not surprising, but I think really worth calling out as key assets that we are working with in the farming community when we start talking about innovative, collaborative ways to address our problems. So just a quick review of our shared farm labor challenges. Labor shortages. And that is what a lot of you all mentioned too in your event registration. What are the challenges that you're experiencing? Can't find workers. Hiring and retention uncertainties. Workers don't stick around. There's the seasonal fluctuation. Folks quit. Then, of course, there's always the time and cost for recruitment. That's kind of a corollary of not finding people and not having them stick around, is you got to go out and get them more and more. And of course, payroll training and HR issues. We also, as we worked through this project more and more, it came to a sense of confusion and overwhelm regarding legal obligations. Jennifer mentioned Entity X. Let me give you a little bit of a sense of how Entity X might work. And this, of course, is a summary of the solutions we gave to farmers to respond to. Farmers across a given region pool their resources into Entity X. Entity X recruits and hires workers and then distributes those, allocates them, assigns them across participating farms. Let's put a twist on this. Workers across a given pool, across a given region, pool their resources into Entity X. Entity X recruits and hires workers and distributes them. So we went both ways, the way we explained it. Entity X takes care of legal, financial, admin, and HR work involved. And farm owners pay Entity X an hourly rate per worker to cover the wages plus the overhead costs of the service that Entity X provides, taking care of the legal, the financial, the scheduling, all that stuff. So that's the basic premise. Now, this could be structured in any number of different ways, but these are the core values that Entity X would provide. So again, we could structure this as a farmer-owned LLC, a worker-owned LLC, farmer-owned cooperative, worker-owned cooperative, even a temp agency with just a plain old single owner, or maybe two owners or something like that. But the bottom line is not a cooperative and not more like a coalition. So no matter how you cut it, each one of these entities is very capable of achieving these goals. If we could do this, if we could achieve these ends through any number of those models, what are the opportunities? Recruitment. Farms could outsource some or all of the recruitment tasks, including running, the help wanted ads, doing background checks, doing the interviewing. There's also legal issues that come into play, like state and federal anti-discrimination laws, migrant worker laws, and it can be cost effective to pay for the expertise or allow a collaborative initiative to specialize in the practical and legal aspects of recruitment. Training. Farmers could coordinate to provide skills-based training, including operating farm equipment, picking, pruning, handling livestock. So farmers could work together to design joint trainings to meet their shared needs. Workers could also collaboratively train each other to upskill their what they can offer to farm owners. Payroll-related employment law compliance. We touched on that. There's minimum wages, overtime, taxes, workers' compensation. Okay, scheduling. By joining forces, farmers and farm workers could efficiently coordinate their schedules to best match farmer supply and demand. In the ultimate manifestation, a farmer could simply make a phone call to get their farm labor needs filled. Last minute, temporary, part-time, full-time, whatever. And on the other hand, workers would have a one-stop shop for finding a farm job, and they could see their options in front of them. Do they want to work in labor? Do they want to do fruits and vegetables? I'm sorry, do they want to work in livestock, fruits and vegetables? What sort of time frame are they looking at? Short-term, long-term? Health and safety. So we could work together to do health and safety training, purchase workers' compensation or other liability policies. A collaborative initiative could invest in developing expertise and training workers to help keep costs low and avoid injuries. It could also advise farmers on legal standards and rules in providing for a safe and healthy workspace. So food safety, a collaborative initiative could invest in learning about, staying abreast of food safety laws and doing that related training. And finally, retention. This could, in theory, improve farm worker retention by providing an avenue for benefits, and also HR facilitation. We did hear from workers in our worker focus groups that, HR, the professionalism can be a little hit or miss, and that would be a value that they would perceive if they could have a more professional HR experience on farms, and certainly more consistent year-round employment. If we leverage these opportunities, could we grow the labor force? And I think that is what's really of key interest to a lot of farm owners, is expanding the pool of available workers who can help meet needs on farms. So if we provided health and safety protections, if there was an advancement trajectory, if there were farms where you could do a stepping stone from entry level to management on one's trajectory to farm ownership, could we provide that HR infrastructure that would give greater assurances, grievances will be heard, your issues will be handled in a professional manner, and potentially, is there opportunity to partnership with related industries like landscaping and off-season industries like value-added production to smooth out the seasonality of labor, to provide that advancement trajectory and multifaceted training? Wouldn't this be glorious, right? Wouldn't it be amazing? Is it possible? Does anybody really want the particulars that would be involved here? Well, I'm going to get into our focus group findings, but let me tell you, coming soon is the full feasibility guide. If that sounded interesting to you, but you're like, well, how does that work? Well, there is where we have examples of how farmers and workers might take on fellow owners of the business or members of a worker cooperative. We have examples of how resources could be allocated to farms, and by that I mean workers, and potential expenses and revenue models of the business as well. We also have detailed results of the focus groups that I'm about to summarize for you, and you can understand the contrast between owner and worker receptiveness to these possibilities. But let me summarize. Focus group finding number 1, farmers generally like the idea of outsourcing paperwork responsibilities. Probably not too surprising, right? Stuff is really boring, get a lot out of it. It's all the same. Everybody's got to fill out the same paperwork. So folks were into it. Farmers often feel overwhelmed and confused when navigating employment law obligations. Now, this was actually a surprising one. We actually did not anticipate that we would go into this project thinking, or realizing this need. Although certainly Farm Commons understands that farm employment law is overwhelming and confusing and spend a lot of time educating on it, we were surprised when conducting the focus groups that there were some baseline misconceptions about what the law required that was hindering farm owners and farm workers' ability to see the potential value. So, for example, folks saying, well, I don't need workers' comp anyways, when in fact they do need workers' comp. They just don't realize that. Or I don't have to pay overtime, when in fact they are supposed to pay overtime. So that the misunderstandings about employment law can negatively impact perceptions about the value of a collaborative arrangement. This is probably not surprising, but focus group finding number 3 is that there was no single most popular model. There wasn't a majority of folks that stood up and said, this is the way forward. And again, maybe this isn't surprising, but it's worth stating it clearly. The nuances of a collaborative solution have to vary depending on the needs and values of the particular community and the particular farm that would be participating in this venture. It is a little painful to have to go through a focus group process just to say, boy, opinions vary. But it is useful in the end to be able to say, there's none of these are just going to work. All of them have their issues, problems, and opportunities, and that we have more work ahead of us to really create solutions. Focus group finding number 4. Farmers expressed a reluctance to share control over some dimensions of their workers with other farmers. So this was also reflected on the worker side. Workers expressed a reluctance to share control with each other over some dimensions of where they would work. This is certainly a major barrier to a collaborative solution. I think, a lot of collaborative arrangements, if they're deeply effective, do require giving up some control over which worker comes to my farm. What do I pay them? Do I even get to pick? Who comes, how long they stay, what else whether they return another year. Reluctance to give up control over training. Well, I want to train my way. Reluctance to give up even knowledge or control of legal compliance. Well, but I already have my systems for doing that, and I would like to do the systems I already have. So then number 5, focus group finding number 5, farmers questions whether it be feasible for them to launch a new venture at the scale needed given limited time and financial resources. So we can summarize this by saying the need for solutions is acute, but there are some real barriers in the way of adopting or implementing, real barriers in terms of the feasibility of entity X in its many shapes and sizes. To go back to our focus group finding number 1, it could be quite useful in terms of outsourcing paperwork. But in terms of recruiting and training workers and assigning who goes where, creating that advancement and year-round retention, much more deeper barriers and not as much enthusiasm for those kinds of solutions. So let's talk about where we can go from here. I always hate to be the bearer of bad news and be like, it's not really going to work out of the gate. But there is some action steps that we can take to continue to move as a community towards a solution. The problems are still there, and we still really need something to go forward with. So going forward, number 1, farmers like the idea of outsourcing paperwork responsibilities. And the good news is we already have solutions for that. We already have payroll companies that are here, willing, able, qualified to take on the paperwork of hiring. So I think we as a community could certainly work to build awareness about the benefits and options of using payroll companies for farm hiring. There are payroll companies that will, on the low end, just file taxes or just submit paperwork to state agencies. But on the upper end of the scale, there are payroll companies that will help with HR, dispute resolution, crafting employment manuals and those sorts of things. So folks have options about how to ease these paperwork responsibilities through existing companies. Number 2, farmers feel overwhelmed and confused around employment law. We can share opportunities for farmers to learn more about employment law obligations. If we're trying to assess collaborative solutions, we do all need to get on the same page about what we're actually required to do day in and day out on the farm. So as you might guess, Farm Commons does try to play a bit strong role in this. So we did draft up some fact sheets that are going to be part of the final feasibility guide. And we have a webinar coming up in a couple of weeks, specifically on employment law obligations in the states we were active in. Okay, no one size fits all model and the nuances of a solution. Well, we do have an action point here. We can facilitate conversations with farmer communities in ways that steer dialogue towards identifying those shared needs and values. That nexus of where do we have shared needs and values, this process wasn't enough to get there. It was very fruitful, but more work is going to be needed, especially because the idea of something like Entity X is still very new. It's like, what? You want me to share my employees with them and I don't control who comes? It's kind of a crazy idea. Number 4, farmers express a reluctance to share control. we can have more conversations in ways that steer dialogue towards identifying where collaboration could be more acceptable. At a baseline, we need more time to continue to have these conversations and say, where do my needs actually align with my neighbor's needs? Where are workers seeking the same things on the farms that they're working at? And where do those needs diverge? And then farmers question whether it would be feasible for them to launch this new venture. Explore opportunities for financing and funding to help support and streamline the process of creating and managing an initiative like this. Same thing for workers. Workers are busy working. They too need opportunities for financing and funding to help form a worker cooperative to facilitate their opportunities on farms. So if we circle on back, the assets that farmers bring: resiliency, creativity, innovation, wisdom, knowledge, solidarity, a shared experience with each other and a commitment to being in community with each other, but also that autonomy. We can explore areas where farmers are more willing to share control. And some of that depends on having more conversations about where our needs intersect and what might be possible. So that is that's the bulk of what we found. I tried to make it very overarching so that you could get a feel for it. But if you want specifics, you just wait for that feasibility guide, because we got some specifics for you as well. So I'm going to, and of course the state specific employment laws, we've got another webinar to help you out with that one. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it back to Jennifer to help us along with the next point in our agenda. Are we at question and answer? Do I remember?
Yes, that's right. So we have definitely some time here for questions. And if you'd like to put them in the chat, or we can do the raise your hand feature and folks can ask them into the audience as well, so folks for the recording can hear that as well. I also just dropped in the chat a link to the SARE project online. So if you want to read all the dirty details of grant reporting, you can, but within those are some embedded links in the report to get at some of the focus groups, discussion guides, and the summary reports that we put together, at least at this stage of the project. It's not the final feasibility guide as Rachel was mentioning, but that can take you to some other resources if you'd like to look at that at some point in the future. But love to open it up for some Q&A, and then we'll be, after some Q&A time, we'll be moving into breakout groups so folks can really discuss in smaller groups. Your feedback about this project, we have some questions for you. We'd like you to take some notes so that we can report back to the bigger group. But all right, thanks, Matt, for the first question here in the chat. Does the federal or state government do anything like this already for migrant workers?
That's a great question. The federal and state governments certainly enforce their own laws around migrant workers, and those laws tend to relate to issuing, written details about what the job is, what the pay is going to be, notifying folks, of the availability of jobs. But the federal and the state governments don't take an interest in anything beyond that, anything that's not a regulatory obligation. So state and federal governments aren't out there figuring out, gosh, do migrant workers have the HR conditions that they want? Do they have opportunities for advancement? Are they getting the types of jobs that they would prefer? That's certainly not anything that federal or state governments are doing. There are definitely nonprofits that are more interested in those questions, but those things are not required. So it's not what the government is up to.
Great, thank you. Other questions folks have? Yes, David, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm wondering, so I think initially I thought that this was that there was some degree of like a pilot program, but this was all like theoretical, right?
Yeah, so the goal of the SARE Novel Approaches Research and Education grants are to look at kind of a sticky or wicked problem
Mhm.
hasn't been solved and figure out the feasibility of something. We don't have to go all the way to the stage of implementation with actually piloting it or doing it, but at least to get enough information gathered and research and discussion to figure out what could be a potential novel solution to this problem. And then it's really up to the agricultural community to kind of take the information and do something with it. At least that's not part of the scope of this grant.
So I'm wondering, I mean, are there examples in other industries of this kind of thing? I know obviously a temp agency would be the most similar that I can think of, but I wonder if there's something where, kind of the specificity of the conditions, like I, as a farmer or farm worker, I know that my work improves drastically the more time I spend on a site. So there are some like industry specific conditions like that, but I'm wondering if there, yeah, are examples from other industries that were considered.
Well, you can find examples of similar needs in terms of like the resort or water park industry, where needs are extremely seasonal. They're very focused. We need people to run this ride, this carnival. So so there are some opportunities there, but a lot of times you're looking at foreign worker programs, student visas, those sorts of things that are bringing folks in on a very seasonal part-time basis, and the work is quite routine, sending kids down water slides and stuff like that. So there could be some possibilities there, but they tend to work strictly like temp agencies and a lot of overseas recruitment. And I think one of the interesting things to me about this project is there was not a lot of enthusiasm for a straight up temp agency model.
Mhm.
Not a lot of enthusiasm. And it was a little tricky to put our fingers on exactly why that hesitation was there. So but at the end of the day, it was not a popular idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think those examples are typically considered unskilled, and of course, there's no such thing as unskilled labor. But but the idea is to like get anybody for as cheap as you can. And I guess like other examples might be like contractors, or there might be some like plumber network where like you don't know the plumber that's going to come to your house necessarily, but you know that like they're going to have a certain set of standards and training and expected pay. So I wonder if there are examples, yeah, that are more, like I think farming, of course, farm labor is has a history of like intentional de-skilling, and so at this point, like to really recognize that there is a skill set that's similar to what other maybe like union-based or cooperative-based industries have. Anyway, I'm wondering if there's any examples from that kind of thing.
I
No,
think it's an interesting question too that I think Jocelyn put in the chat as well. Does this connect to more agri-college internships? Thinking about seeing that, and that's one of the things. New Entry has started the National Ag Apprenticeship Learning Network exactly for that reason, to think about how do we professionalize the skill of agriculture. I mean, how do we look at it as a skilled trade? And the on-farm work learning opportunities really involve, when you're talking about like plumbers examples or electricians or others that go through apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs, journeyman programs that we've seen. There's paid on-the-job training, there's supplemental college credit or other it's professional training that goes along with it. Like agriculture hasn't quite fully adopted those kind of training models. We don't give people a certification saying you've completed all the skills and competencies in this job book when you've worked on my farm after a season or two, because I provided you with this education and paid on the job training. Like, we haven't quite gotten the ag industry there yet. I think that's starting to change. The dairy grazing apprenticeship is one example. PASA has developed a diversified vegetable apprenticeship program. University of Wisconsin-Madison CSA Coalition has a registered diversified vegetable manager position. So they're starting to pop up. I think when we have more of that, we'll be able to see that that be a possibility of a recruitment pool, as if there are more of those kind of programs and graduates coming out of them. So, great, thank you for bringing that up. We have another question from Lauren in the chat. Would these collaboratives need to be local or regional, and what degree of geographical proximity would farms need to have to share in the resources provided by an entity X?
Great question, and definitely something that that the farmers in the focus group asked themselves. And the bottom line is that it really depends on what exactly are we turning to this collaborative arrangement to address. If it's just paperwork, just recruitment, legal obligations, things like that, well, we can capture a larger geographic area because we're not actually assigning people to farms, or over here one day and then over there the next day. So there's absolutely some geographic limitations when we're talking about more of a temp agency type of framework. But we can go regional when we are talking more paperwork and HR type of thing. So it depends.
Great, thank you. And Soraya, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say that we kind of try something like that. We had a specific project. We had 4 acres in production. We only need people twice a week, right? And we contracted those temporary workers, but they were not trained. But agriculture is simple, right? And it was, I would say, the most nightmarish experience I've had, because I had to train those people every time they come, because it was different people coming. We had a specific ask, like we need 10 workers for this amount of hours, and this is the farm address, and they arrived on time. All the paperwork was done. So that was awesome, seamless. But when we got the workers, every time we need to train them. So every time was like, some people, like I say, 2 of them worked hard, and the rest, they were like somewhere in another place, and you had to get the work done. And, we really need like a skilled X company. Like the company has to be like towards a very specific agricultural background thing. The training has to happen, because the experience I had, that I had to deal with the new and the unexpected part, it wasn't easy.
Absolutely. I think that's why we were looking at this from different viewpoints, right? Like if it's the farmer-owned cooperative, do they invest in training multiple workers that then they can hire and share specific to their farm operations? Is it a tight geographic group? Is it a group of workers that specialize in particular skills that become known for being really efficient and cost effective, and hire their labor out? So it could look very different. And I think maybe that's part of why people reacted strongly to not really wanting to go with the temporary worker. In our focus groups that I was part of, it was a lot about justice and having horror stories of people not being treated well in those models. And I'm sure similarly, if other producers had bad experiences, that could certainly lend a flavor to moving away from interest in those models as well. All right, so I see Jessica has a clarifying question here in the chat, and then I'll come to you, Chuck. I see your hand is raised. Jessica's question is, what size farms, kind of farms, participated in the focus groups? Because there was so much reluctance of giving up control over hiring, given how many large farms do use farm labor contractors. So I don't know if you want to take that, Rachel.
I'm so sorry, I got lost scrolling to look for the question.
It was up a little bit, but I can start. The size of the farms and the kind of farms, it really varied across the region, since we did talk to farms, across 5 different states. Some of the extension groups had larger farms that had been around in business for a while, but our target were, diversified direct market vegetable farms that had employees and, that were mostly doing vegetable production. They were some scale difference, I would say, between the focus groups. Some were some of the attendees in our group, maybe in Massachusetts, we did one at the NOFA conference, we did one in Eastern Mass. Many of them were smaller scale, starting out beginning farmers. So I think we got a pretty diverse perspective across the region, from large farms to small farms to urban farms to rural farms and people in between. I don't know if Nicole, you're nodding your head, or Rachel, if you have any other, or Jeff, who's on the call, have any other
We set up the data gathering to be able to break out responses by demographic information like size of farm or type of operation, and then sample sizes were too low. This was right at the dawn of COVID, and so just the disruption to the focus groups and some of them getting canceled and them being online in the early days of people doing that, there was just not enough data to try to break it out with any consistency.
Great. All right. Chuck, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, so just have a lot of questions just because I've worked on a lot of different farms, vegetable farms, and I work on a dairy farm. And the one thing that like would change things for me is just because like wealth in agriculture is so much to do with like the farm owner gaining equity in their operation, and it has a lot less to do with like the wage. Like wages are sort of a smokescreen in this scenario, because like if you can't build wealth through equity in something, like you're just treading water all the time. So I was just wondering if there's any like adaptation to this idea that like created power for the workers or like created equity for workers in something, just because like there's really no path from like working on a farm to owning a farm without some like intermediate step of some higher paying job elsewhere or inheriting stuff. So, you know, just thinking of like union workers unions or like cooperative conversions of farms, or like even like looking at the lessons from the Vermont dairy farm workers with Milk with Dignity and the way that they created their own standards and put pressure on the buyers to hold the farmers accountable to it. So just wondering if you have any like adaptations to this to like really take the like power lens and like wealth and equity in capitalism lens to how it might be an actually appealing thing for someone to want to do long term as a worker.
Right. Yeah, in terms of equity building, the worker-owned cooperative provides that avenue for the distribution of profit at the end of the day towards those who are participating in the business, in the cooperative. Of course, the problem is that where does the profit come from? You know, where is the charging more for one's hour per labor through the worker cooperative than the costs of providing that service? And so that the issues of cost and really rough business modeling for what any of these entities would have to charge in order to come out with any kind of profit and further the incentive to participate is very, very challenging, because if this labor is more expensive than the status quo, how many people will use it? And how strong does that value have to be to justify that this labor costs $3, $4, $5 more per hour than the labor that's currently being utilized?
Great. And then Kristen, this is probably our last question, and then we'll move into breakout groups and you can have more discussion and robust conversation in those groups as well. We have some questions for you, but Kristen's asking if we can provide any more information on the farm employees who shared input via focus groups, et cetera, and was curious if any might have been middle managers, or whether any of the sessions were conducted in Spanish, or if we reached out to any representatives of farm worker advocacy organizations.
I don't think I don't have at hand the demographics on how many were middle managers. I don't, they were all employees actually, so there wasn't any representatives in there. There were definitely those who had been in their work for a number of years. We didn't ask, well, we did ask if they had achieved a management position. I can include that I don't think we have that in the draft feasibility report, but it wouldn't be hard for me to run those demographics and provide that. So I appreciate that question. I think we can add that in.
Yes, and unfortunately, we did not conduct any of the focus groups in Spanish. I think that would be, if we were to do this again, it might be nice to reach out to those farm worker groups and host, Spanish language focus groups with workers from those backgrounds. That would be a great addition to get their input and ideas. And yeah, that's an oversight, I guess, for this project that we didn't include that voice in this research. All right, so what we're going to do now, and thank you so much for all your great questions. Please keep them coming. If you have other questions that you didn't get to, that is one of our questions in the breakout questions we'd like to have you work through. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see the questions that we're going to ask and a little bit about the process. Let's see here. Hopefully that goes into slide view mode. So we'll break you into small groups. We hopefully have enough facilitators to help guide you through the discussion, but this is an opportunity for you to introduce yourselves, to maybe share a little bit about what you came here to learn or were hoping to learn about labor issues, which of what you heard today are action steps that you could move forward either in your community or on your farm might be meaningful. Do you think it's reasonable or feasible in your area to address these challenges? And where could farmers give up control, or where is the essence of collaboration giving up control, and other remaining questions that you may have. And this is just a guide to help you have some conversation. Obviously, if there are other things that you'd like to talk about or bring up in your groups, please do so. We have a link that I'll put here in the chat in a second that can take everyone to a Jamboard file, which will have a title of each of your groups at the top, and the questions are posted there as well. So if you'd like to do some group brainstorming or get some notes down as the note-taking format, we offer that to you so that we can share that out at the end. And if each of your groups can select a note taker and select someone to report back, we'd like to hear the highlights of your conversation or things that came up for you as we go forward with next steps. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can open the breakout rooms. We'll have about 20 minutes in each of the groups, and then we'll come back and report out from the groups, and we'll share some additional resources that we've compiled for you before we close the session today. So, all right. So please be patient if you're on the phone or you're joining in. We hope that you will be able to turn your camera on and join in the discussion here. So I'm going to open these up, and I just want to make sure that our facilitators are assigned to different rooms. And great, I think this should work. All right, so we'll see you back here at 4:10. I'll send a reminder out into the rooms when it's time to come back. Ryan or James, do you need to be assigned to a room? Are you all able to participate? James Birch, are you available to join one of your rooms? Oh, you're joining now. Okay, perfect. Great, thank you. And how about Ryan Bishop? Are you able to join one of the groups? You're going to be going to room 6. Let me know if you're having any issues, James, so I can help you. All right, Ryan, are you there? Are you able to join Group 6, Ryan Bishop? So room 4 just has 3 other people, so I'll move into room 4. And you could go to room 5 where there's, or room 6 where there's no facilitator if you'd like, because unless you want to go into Jeff's room. Oh, sorry, Rachel. I think you're
Yeah,
on
sorry
mute.
about that. Yeah, I'll go where there's no facilitator. Let's see if
Okay.
anything is
Great.
needed.
All right, you're off to room 6. Thank you.
Mhm.
Ryan, are you there yet? I'm just still checking on you to make sure if you'd like to be put in a group, we can add you. Welcome back. Do you guys have a good discussion?
It picked up, yeah.
Good. I know. It's like once you get on the roll, then it's like, oh no, now we're out of time.
Precisely. But thank you for making this possible. It's very nice to have these types of conversations because I think they are direly needed in our time.
Absolutely. I know. I feel like no one person is going to solve all these huge structural challenges by themselves. So the more we can get people thinking and talking and working together and being creative and innovative, like, yeah. What is the definition of insanity? Like still trying to solve the same problem with the same mindset or whatever, however it goes, I guess. Trying to do something different by doing the same thing. So we got to mix it up a little bit. So great. And I'm excited to hear what you guys came up with or what your discussion topics were.
Oh, there's someone who has an alpaca ranch. That's really cool.
Meeting is being recorded.
Great. Oh, nice baby. Hello. Awesome. Well, welcome back, everybody. I think we're all just about back. Let me just make sure no one's hanging out in any rooms. It's like we have, is Nicole's group back? Okay, great. Perfect. Well, wonderful. Well, we'd love to just go around and hear what some of the highlights of your conversation were, group by group, or any key questions that you have that you'd like to bring into the room that we can answer. We have some time for that, and then we'll wrap up with next steps. So should we start with, maybe we'll go from the end to the beginning just to mix it up a little bit. So let's start with group 6. Would you guys like to report out? So that was, just as a reminder, in case you weren't sure who you were, Jasmine, Jessica, Marion, Rachel, and Soraya. Nope. Jasmine, you're the reporter. There you go.
Yeah. So I guess we were just talking pretty much about finding someone permanent. I'm over by a college campus over in Connecticut. And so a lot of college students who find interest in agriculture really kind of come and go very quickly. And then just discovering training, like even if somebody sounds good over the phone or intrigued when they get to where you are, they can't really follow through. So so training, finding things on paper to what they can actually, just how much you devote to training. And you know, farming is just so unbelievably personal. So you put so much into training, so much into inviting these people, and some only want to stay even a month or so, and then you're moving on and putting in all of that effort. So with your presentation, I can definitely understand why a lot of farmers releasing control, that's a lot to put out there, and it's been very difficult to try and find the right person. So we were talking about that.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Were there any key questions or unanswered questions that your group talked about that we should address before we finalize this project, as much as we can anyway?
I'll let someone else chime in if they would like.
I have an interesting one that, well, one of our group members, how would the professional development looks like for farm workers? That was an interesting one.
Yeah, what would professional development look like? That's a great, good food for thought. Thank you for sharing that. All right, room 5. Who would like to report out for room 5? That was Ben's group.
I'm going to report out, but if my group has anything else to add, please fill in. We had one grower who's a strawberry grower who mentioned that there is a certainly a wariness that comes with relinquishing control when it comes to your workers. But since her work comes in pockets, there's times when there's the harvest or the mulching or the unmulching, it would be worth it to just know that those weeks are covered, even if she has to relinquish some control. We then got into a conversation about how to pay people and independent, how the rules for independent contractors don't usually actually apply to what we're trying to get done on the farm through our farm workers. As far as which action steps were meaningful, we talked a little bit about just helping people realize that there are agencies and organizations that will help with payroll, and it can be a great option. Someone mentioned that QuickBooks payroll can also be a good option. Maybe you meet with a CPA once a year. And then someone highlighted that co-op workers can opt out of workman's comp, or the owners, I mean, can. So that was a relevant point for the discussion. And the advice to speak with other small businesses instead of just thinking of farms as kind of an isolated sector. Networking with other small businesses related to labor might be something worth exploring as well. I don't know if my team has anything else to add there, but.
Great, thank you so much. Sounds like good suggestions. Awesome, room 4. I think that was Jeff's group.
Yep, we had a small group, and we had folks from Maine and Massachusetts, as well as folks from Alabama. So that was one of the first things we noticed, was the contrast in the just the situation in Northeast. You know, there was a need for you know, looking for labor, trying to solve labor shortages, and then in Alabama there was a situation where the two folks there represented a project that basically had a pipeline of trained, very skilled labor and not a clear place to send them. And so that's what had brought everyone into the room and into the meeting today. I mean, we did talk a little bit about this question about control and who's giving up control, and that most likely farmers would be willing to give up control over who is working at the farm each day, so long as they had some sort of assurance that those folks were skilled. However, you know, we were also thinking, well, what about for the workers? How would they feel about being sent off to different farms each day? You know, would that be a level of control that they would not like? And perhaps, but if you were less experienced and kind of new to farming, just going out to a couple different farms might be a great exposure to just learning a lot. So folks who are new in their career or exploration of farming, that might work well. And those were the main things we discussed. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. All right, room 3. That was Brian, Emily, Jocelyn, and Meredith.
Yeah, I think, you know, similar things came up. I tried to take notes, but I think we scratched a lot of the surfaces on some of these things, just kind of looking for options and hearing what's out there and around. We thought that, you know, where in Massachusetts are, like, the feasibility of this feels like it should be very doable. You know, I think a lot of people are interested in local food and would be possibly open to paying for it. And then like how that would fit into like funding a worker collaborative across a larger region. A lot of people are like trying to just get a little bit more of a sense of that. A couple questions that came up were like looking for grants to pay for labor instead of things, and options around that. And then another thing that I had mentioned a little bit is how does hiring fit into somebody who's like farming part-time? Because I've seen a lot of that in the area, and just keeping on top of the farm is hard enough. And then if you're doing it all by yourself, how do you hire folks? So I think that's about what my report back is. If anyone else in the group wants to share, I'm happy to mute myself.
Thank you, Brian. Awesome. And our last group is Nicole's group, Carrie, David, Lauren, and Nicole.
Yeah, I can start us off, and then same. I will mute gladly upon anyone else's input. We had an interesting group and question that came up because one of the determinations was that a helpful approach may be actually piloting leaning on a grant to test these in the absence of the large hurdles of time and money, which we know are very prevalent. And interestingly enough, one person in our group was actually doing a pilot, not on a grant, in real life. And the question was around, okay, I've got these farmers together, we're working as a group. It all started with trusting relationships and building those relationships and identifying that we were all doing the same thing and facing the same problem. So it did start with conversations, but now what is the actual steps? Like, does a entity exist that could actually help this co-op take it to the next step?
Great. That sounds really exciting. Is that Carrie's example here that she's adding to in the chat? She said she mentioned that she hired a part-time intern through Rogue Farm Corps who will be working an additional day a week for another farm, because those two farms can't afford to pay for a full-time employee. So sounds like they're doing some sharing there. So great. Well, we'll have to circle back with you, Carrie, to see how that works out as you continue to pilot and develop the model. So thank you for sharing that. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for reporting out. We wanted to leave you with some resources as we close out the session today. So I'm going to share my screen and try to do two things at once. Also wanted to launch a little poll while we're going through some next steps and resources. So let me see if I can do that as well, just so if people have to drop off. Just have a few questions for you so we can evaluate how today's session went. So if you can be answering those three questions while I talk a little bit about next steps and some other resources that we have. So as Rachel mentioned, we will be working on these farm employment fact sheets to help continue the educational process with producers, or really around understanding labor law. I think we definitely found that as we were going through the focus groups that there was still a lot of confusion and misinformation about what producer obligations were in terms of hiring employees. It is really hard to keep up with all of it. So we'll try to put that together and get those out as part of the decision guide that Rachel was mentioning. She also mentioned we'll have a producer webinar on April 13th at 3 o'clock, really going over those farm employment law and labor law information for folks that want to continue to learn about expectations and requirements in the area. We'll continue to finalize the analysis of the survey that we sent out this spring and incorporate that into the final report and recommendations. So those are next steps. I did put in the chat earlier, I'll recopy it before we close today, but if you'd like to keep up with, again, the reporting, you can always find that on the SARE website where we report at the end of every year, and we'll put all the final information there as well. And then we'll send out a follow-up email, but there are a lot of other labor resources that are available for folks to look at if you want to continue to learn more. So the Department of Labor has their Ag Compliance Toolkit on their website. Again, we'll send these around in links. Farm Commons, if you become a member, has a whole collection of labor law information for workers and employees. So a lot of great resources there. The Cornell Small Farms Program put together a bunch of farm employee training resources and standard operating procedures that were compiled by Cornell Cooperative Extension educators. There's also some farming guides for New York. If you're from New York, it has a lot more than farm labor, but the labor sections have been reviewed by Farm Commons, so that might be a helpful resource for you. On New Entry's website, we have some farm labor resources and webinars that we've put together before with some of our partners, and those are also available on our YouTube channel. We worked a lot with the Conservation Law Foundation's Legal Food Hub in the past. They also have a resource library with employment resources available there. And on the YouTube channel, we just wrapped up a whole series with MAFCA and their labor management series. So those recordings are on the YouTube channel, and that really focused on workplace culture and centering workers and things like that. So if you're kind of in that mode of how do you retain your employees, there was a lot of great information shared on those videos. So check that out. University of Connecticut Extension put together a page on farm labor issues and regulations for Connecticut. And then UVM has a whole multi-year project and a farm labor dashboard website with lots of resources, tools, and their 2022 labor workshop series. So there's more workshops that they'll be doing also in April. So a lot of great resources out there to continue learning and following up. So there's our YouTube channel. And just wanted to thank you all for being part of this session today. Thank you to the Northeast SARE for going out on a limb and funding these novel approaches and allowing us to ask some difficult questions and figure out what might be some potential solutions to put out to the community, and to all the farmers and workers who participated in the focus groups, and to our amazing extension educators and partners throughout the Northeast who helped us make this possible, and to Farm Commons for synthesizing it all into these great reports and resources that we have. So that kind of concludes our session today. I hope everybody was able to fill out the poll. Stop sharing my screen. And if there are any final questions, we have 3 minutes left. I'm happy to stay on and continue to answer questions, but otherwise, just really appreciate everybody being here today and sharing the space. So thank you all.
I have a question.
Sure.
I was wondering if you have any sense, and maybe you don't, but for how big a collaboration would be needed in order for it to be effective, like beyond like 2 farms sharing the same employee, something that's more reliable for the workers and for the employers. Like how many farms would need to be involved, or how many employees, or is that you have no idea?
I can answer this question actually. My name is Catherine. I've done a couple sort of assessments of this kind and found something around 20 employees per 7 farms or something like that. So if there's 20 employees, they could support up to 7 farms collectively as a labor co-op. I don't know if that answers your question, but and I think it's a case-by-case feasibility.
Yeah,
but
for sure. That's a lot.
That could be a little rule of thumb, I guess.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Great, I appreciate that. Yeah, Catherine, it looks like you're from the Cooperative Development Institute, and you guys have had a long history of helping groups form probably worker-owned cooperatives, labor cooperatives, all kinds of cooperatives. So that's great to have that experience. I was even going to say, I don't know, like I'm making it up. I would say you could probably just start with a couple people, 2 farms, and figure it out. Like, you know, start small and work out whatever. You know, if you guys can develop, you know, aligned values and shared values and agreements, you know, you could start small and expand it over time. And maybe there is a magical efficiency number, but I think that would be to be determined. We'd love to learn from you if you do it. Great, and Susan's sharing that she has 2 farms and 2 people in a model that works. Great. Other questions, or other folks have thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to add a very small thought. I think it's wonderful to have these types of conversations because they're so needed. And in terms of wanting to get farmers involved, and maybe the contentious issue of like allowing collaboration over control, I would just suggest that you really pitch that in a very gracious and genuine way to really get the result that you're looking for, because I think it's the last thing that farmers would want to consider, you know, to try to make the future of their farm viable. It can be a bit of a I don't know, the outcome that neither party wants, you know. That's just a thought that I was having.
Great, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a lot of it is in the framing. Start from that appreciative perspective, which is great.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thanks for attending. And thanks to Kristen Wilner for putting in the chat as well. I didn't include all the resources on ag labor law that CISA has put together on their website. So she shared that link in the chat. So please do feel free to, yeah, share other resources as folks have them. I'm happy to send them out after the end as well. So
Jennifer, I have one more question, but we can talk after if it's not appropriate. We're trying to pull together some kind of like leadership training as far as, you know, and I think you mentioned maybe that there was some stuff on your new entry farmer stuff on labor, you know, just, you know, cultivating like good trainings and stuff and being a good leader of a farm crew, you know, as far as some of our small farms. Have you guys done any programming around that?
I think a lot of through the Ag Apprenticeship Learning Network and our mentor training series, we've done some of that through the webinars. Yeah, I can send you the links to those as well. And you may also want to check out the Mentor Toolkit that we developed. There's a lot of great information in there that's not necessarily specific to farm mentors, but could be applicable to any farm employer, that I think addresses maybe some of those areas around good communication, emotional intelligence, you know,
sure, yeah,
all of those kind of things around leadership and kind of being the manager leader on your farm in so many ways. Right. I think a lot of times farms, as we know, like we all end up in these positions without really training. It's like,
yeah, I feel like that
grow our skills.
Most farmers are very hard workers and they just want it done their way, but communication is a really not good strong point for many. And so how to get beyond that and not just expect that they know everything that you know and have, you know, but doing it in a really like cohesive team building way. I think a lot of people, you know, it is something we want to do some programming around.
Great. Awesome.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. See you soon.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, thanks everybody else. I'm going to close us out. So I really appreciate you coming and we'll see you next time. Thanks.